Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. So, the last part of the Tommy Robinson Manifesto book. It's only a few pages, so maybe what I'll do is I'll probably have a look through some of the notes while I'm at it. So, yeah, it's just going to be a matter of read these, last 7 pages, I think, and then basically we'll go from there. So, we covered in the last chapter real democracy. Now we do chapter 7, the concluding remarks. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. George Orwell, unpublished preface on the censorship of Animal Farm. The purpose of this book has been to bring you up to speed with the scale and timeline of the political, economic, and demographic corruption which needs to be overturned. The reason why we have talked so much about the oligarchy rather than the more common phrase, the elite, is twofold. In the first place, if we use the phrase the elite, it has the implication that they may actually be superior to the average citizen, certainly under the ideology of democratic elitism, which has been taught at university since the 1940s. The 1% do believe that they are superior to the masses. See chapter 3.4. Secondly, it is fundamentally important to understand not only that this 1% rule over you, but the system that you live in is not democracy. It is oligarchy. A word that the oligarchy ensure is so little used that most of you have probably never given any thought to the word oligarchy before you read this book. Using the term the oligarchy not only identifies this small group of people, but also provides you with the word to understand the social and political system under which you have lived your entire life. Our definition of membership of the oligarchy is anyone who has more influence on politics and social policy than the average voter, who has, what we have shown you, has principally been about the oligarchy in Britain. But it applies to every country that is supposedly a democracy. We have also shown you specific examples from Canada, the Netherlands, and Israel. The oligarchy who rule you, whilst pretending you live in a democracy with the pretense of free speech and the pretense of rule of law, are responsible for everything that has happened. They don't hold a referendum before going to war. They send you and your children off to die on foreign lands with no say. Once war is declared, they suspend the pretense of democracy just to ensure that those whose families will die are unable to stop the killing. Wars are disruptive, and afterwards the oligarchy have gained more power. The oligarchy claim they are managing the economy, managing your welfare, managing global weather, managing your perceptions that a man with a beard is a woman. And since World War II, in the democratic West, among themselves, they have openly talked about how they manage your voting under the proclaimed ideology of democratic elitism. Again, see as discussed above in chapter 3.4. This is the ideology they use in the books, journals, university degrees, and conferences, content hidden away from most people. They don't tell the masses that since the time of Lenin, this is how they really view us. You are all too stupid to make decisions, so we, the elite, must make them for you. In their elitist view, we, the public, are dumb beasts who need to be farmed and herded by the elite. Those who learn from their association with the oligarchy that the elite see the public as dumb animals realize that going along with this elitist ideology is the path to greater power and riches, so they keep quiet and set about working their way up the oligarchy. It takes a strange person to see this path and power, or to power and wealth, but to reject it on principle. In addition to managing all of the above elements of the world right before your eyes, The oligarchy are managing the replacement of the indigenous people in Western Europe. See Appendix 1 for the proof about England. We have included the UN documents for this plan at the end of this book, so you can see for yourself that they have had these specific plans for decades. See Appendix 2 and 3. Since the excuse for population replacement is bogus, we need immigrants to fund the welfare state. What is the real reason? The only explanation that makes sense is power. The oligarchy have realised that they need to keep the electorate divided. Divide and conquer is a principle the oligarchy will learn from schoolboy history. What better way to do this than by fracturing homogeneous societies in different ethnicities into those ethnicities, opposing religions, especially those religions founded on violence against others. See Appendix 12, Muhammad's Wars. The oligarchy are intent on balkanizing the country geographically. Immigrant cities, indigenous small towns, Welsh and Scottish nationalism, supposedly being a good thing and progressive, while English nationalism is supposedly evil and far right. Of course, the oligarchy have known about Robert Michaels and others exposing the fraud of liberal democracy. The oligarchy came up with the idea of cryptocurrency in 1996 because it suits their plans for programmable money. But they didn't put any effort into discussing in the past 3 decades how internet technology could be used to enable direct democracy, because real democracy would rob the oligarchy of their power. But the oligarchy were no doubt aware that technology now made direct democracy possible. Before the masses could wake up to the realization that it's now possible to replace the oligarchy, the latter set about ensuring that civil war of different tribes would come to the West. How much time and effort has been demanded by the problems Islam brought to the West? Now consider how that distracted the public from understanding the views of Rousseau, Cobbett, Jack London, Michaels, Orwell, Aldous Huxley, etc., etc. The oligarchy have known for 2,000 years how bread and circuses can be used to keep the masses distracted. In recent centuries, the oligarchy have used religion, mass media, sport, the welfare state, drugs, etc., as their bread and circuses. As we've shown, they can openly discuss their plans, safe in the knowledge that so few of the masses will pay attention, so that nothing can stop the plans of the oligarchy to extend their power and riches. In 2008, the British charity Civitas published the book Total Recall: How Direct Democracy Can Improve Britain in 2008. On the back cover it says, "Many of the laws that govern the lives of people in Britain are made by people who never have to stand for election, and those who may not even live in this country." But if you read that book, you will also find nothing about this. It appears to be an allusion to the fact that the EU passes laws that apply in Britain, or that Scottish MPs sitting in Westminster have a hand in creating laws from which Scotland is exempt. Beyond that, the book is of very little substance, just advocating more use of referendums and little else. If you search the Civitas website looking for documents on electoral reform or direct democracy, you'll find nothing published since 2010. Civitas has a staff of over a dozen people. In 2022, total income was £605,215. Of this, donations amounted to £550,357. Their stated mission is, and I quote, "We search for solutions to economic and social problems constrained by the short-term priorities of political parties or conventional wisdom." End quote. Yet when it comes to political reform, they have had nothing to say for nearly 20 years. We hope that our book has provided you with more insight and more to think about than you will find in reports by oligarchy-approved organisations such as Civitas or the Institute of Strategic Dialogue. The oligarchy ensure that no money gets to anything that could challenge their self-enrichment, so we get no funding from any organisation. Instead, they do all they can to keep us silent and to keep the public distracted with the demonisation as the far right. Through the combination of the lure of the welfare state and the pretense of democracy, the oligarchy maintain power through money, printing, taxation, and inflation. They get rich. The power and money allows them to play the great game of geopolitics, murdering people, and rearranging power from around the globe. All of this was explained by political analysts and economists over a century ago. With population replacement and the becoming programmable money, the oligarchy are moving into realms of domestic conflict and repression that most people cannot begin to imagine. The clock is ticking. Before 2041, the English will certainly be an ethnic minority in their own land, hated and victimized by the replacement population. The oligarchy siding with their mascots, the 50 years during which organized Muslim grooming gangs were permitted to systematically drug and rape English schoolgirls, should be all the evidence you need. Need further evidence? The Notting Hill Carnival can have 334 arrests and 8 stabbings in a good year. Any English event like that would be banned, but because it's celebrating Caribbean culture, it is praised by the oligarchy and funded with millions of pounds. The policing costs for just 3 days, fucking hell, is nearly £12 million. Still need more evidence? Every mosque is state funded, handing out the Quran, which commands kill the unbelievers. But when a 53-year-old woman encouraged people to burn down a mosque, she was jailed. With 40,000 Muslims on the terrorist watch list, the Quran and its incitement to murder is protected and funded by your own taxes. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. By 2051, the British as a whole will be an ethnic minority on the entire island, equally despised and victimized by the oligarchy and the replacement population. This headline was in the news recently. No whites. Graffiti in Birmingham. Racist graffiti in Birmingham reading no whites and no whites allowed. The graffiti appeared in 3 locations across the inner city. The Telegraph, 26th of August, 2024. Think that such racism towards the indigenous people is rare? It isn't. It's just that the oligarchy makes sure it's soon forgotten. Think, well, it's just some graffiti. Okay, here's a report from 20 years ago, of which undoubtedly you will never have heard. Asian men jailed over race attack. The court heard that as many as 30 men attacked the group of 5 white people, shouting racial abuse. The 3 men convicted of attacking him were all found guilty of attempted murder, grievous bodily harm, and violent disorder. Of the 30 racist Asians involved in the attack, only 3 were jailed. This is standard practice from the police in the state when the mascots do something impossible to ignore. But of course the mainstream media won't tell you this. You know the drill, folks, because say it with me, it doesn't suit the narrative. Just a few years after this shocking case of racist violence dropped down the memory hole, we spoke to someone who lived less than a mile from where the attack happened. This man had voted Labour all his life. He was the local neighbourhood watch coordinator, contacting the police whenever he found the Muslim gangs had concealed weapons in that area. Weapons like that used in that vicious attack. The Labour voter contacted us after he suffered a racist attack on his home by one of the Muslim gangs. On phoning the police emergency number, the police were very concerned about a racist attack until they found out that the victim was white and the violent racist was not. The police response was, "We are not coming because you are white and they are not." This is absolutely disgusting. I'm sorry. I have to stop there for a sec because that is unequivocally fucking disgusting. Why should the police have the right to say, we're not attending because you're white? That is unequivocal racism. Unequivocal prejudice from the police. And I do sincerely hope that people call out Birmingham police on this. I believe it was Birmingham police. It might, or it might not have been. Oh no, it is Birmingham because a mile away from, yeah. Sorry, I was just a little confused for a sec with what I just said. But no, it is actually Birmingham because they mention white graffiti and racism, 38 racist Asians attack the people, and then all of a sudden, this happens. But I'm going to read it again just for the sakes of just really sinking that into you. On phoning the police emergency number, the police were very concerned about a racist attack, until they found out that the victim was white and the violent racist was not. The police response was, and I quote, verbatim, "We are not coming because you are white and they are not." End quote. Appalled, he went to complain to his Labour MP. She, protected from violence by security doors and security guards, simply shrugged. Nice, huh? The Neighbourhood Watch coordinator was then contacted by a black officer he had worked with some years. The officer told him the police policy is never to support white victims of racist violence. The best thing you can do is move to a town with few immigrants. He contacted us to share this story with us. Then he too took part in white flight, understanding that the state had allied with the violent racists it had imported and that there is no rule of law. That is just one of thousands of cases of racist violence against the indigenous people that goes unrecorded. And again, the mainstream media will not tell you this. If the victim had been an immigrant and the violence was from an English gang, the story would have been national news. No way, you say? Okay, here's a story from the same year which was national news because a Muslim family claimed a packet of ham and a wooden cross was found near their home. No violence, no identifiable gang, no racist abuse. But the police conducted house-to-house inquiries. The Muslim family were given a new home and their story was national news. The story about this attack in 2012 received vastly more news coverage than did the 30 men slicing open the head of a white man in a racist attack just 4 years earlier. Again, the same line. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Remember that the fascist state says it can't even provide statistical data about the incidence of murder. The mercenaries of the oligarchy only collect the data the oligarchy wants. Everything else has dropped down the memory hole. The state doesn't even keep a public page listing all the Islamic terrorist attacks, but the state does keep a page telling the people of Britain that the English Civil War was a religious conflict. The oligarchy continuously imports the replacement population, then whips them into a frenzy of hatred against the indigenous people with the claims of institutional racism, history of slavery, etc., etc. Remember who in Britain profited from the slave trade? The oligarchy, not the white working class. Remember who controls racist institutions? The oligarchy, not the white working class. We could find dozens of individual cases of white people murdered by immigrants in Britain, all of which cases have been dropped down the memory hole. You can be sure that state-funded anti-fascist organisations like Hope Not Hate, or maybe I was right first time, are not interested in this form of hatred because they are not going to risk their funding from the state. Black people who die at the hands of white people are turned into saints. The white people killed by immigrants are all forgotten. And virtually every racist attack on the indigenous people will be ignored. The tribal conflict that the oligarchy deliberately imported is becoming impossible to ignore. Remember who the real enemy is. The oligarchy. Now, there are going to be some numbered points here. Quite a lot of them, in fact. Before it ends. There are 14 points. So please pay attention. What can you personally do? 1. Read and reread Animal Farm to your children. Treat it like a religious text, because leftists and Muslims are indoctrinating their kids with their religious texts. 2. Start urgently pushing for direct democracy. Let people know that they don't need to be farmed animals. Ideas like referendums or proportional representation are simply not radical enough. These things will not stop the oligarchy. Germany has PR and the other parties are ganging up to ban the second most popular party. The Netherlands has PR, and when Geert Wilders finally got the most votes, he is being stopped from being Prime Minister by the other parties. Remember, every organisation of any side will become a self-serving oligarchy. The Brexit referendum was a waste of time. 3. Start being self-reliant and look after my own health. After your own health. Well, I do need to look after my health technically. I'm not exactly fit, am I? Anyway, when the money bubble implodes, the welfare state will vanish. It may take some time to get healthy, so it's better to do it now than suddenly struggle. Excuse me. When the false promise of the welfare state becomes obvious and an immediate practical problem for you. Point 4. Start actively resisting the introduction of central bank digital currency and programmable money. This is what they're going to use to completely control the public. 5. Start warning about and resisting the oligarchy's march to World War III. This crisis will be the earliest excuse for introducing programmable money and total serfdom across liberal democracies. War means more socialism and more control by them. 6. Stop paying any attention to mainstream media. The oligarchy need to keep you continually brainwashed so you forget what you've learned and what you've experienced. The more opportunity you give them to put media between you and reality, the more opportunity you give them to manipulate you. If you let their propaganda wash over you day and night, you will become a phrase slave and not even be aware that you've been brainwashed. 7. Start talking to people in real life. Your family, your neighbours. The more barriers that the oligarchy can put up between you and your community, the more power you give to the oligarchy. 8. Stop giving any money to those organisations, i.e. football clubs, global corporations, churches, etc., who are destroying your society. If just 20% of those customers of those organisations withdrew their support, the organisations would stop betraying you. As a group, you have the power to make them change. Individually, you have the power to stop being complicit. This is known as consumer sovereignty. It is an acknowledgement in economics of how powerful is the consumer. Consumers can increase that sovereign power by coordinated action. Over 60% of the electorate are disenfranchised, robbed of sovereignty in each sporadic election in the UK, not even getting the representative of their choice. See Appendix 8. As we discussed in Chapter 6, the majority of the public know that Britain's liberal democracy is rigged. Point 9. Look for ways to avoid liability for tax. For example, every meal you eat cooked in a business outside your home is you paying sales tax to the state, and that's you giving more power to the oligarchy. Every time you gamble, including the national lottery, you are feeding money to the oligarchy. Lotteries were illegal in the UK for centuries, described by the elite as a tax on the stupid people, because there's virtually no chance to win anything significant. Yet, the oligarchy still introduced the natural lottery because it provides them yet another mechanism to fund your destruction. Point 10. Avoid borrowing money for interest. The interest is payment to the oligarchy. The more debt you have, the less self-reliant you are. The more debt you have, the less willing you will be to take inconvenient action. Number 11. No one is coming to rescue you. If you do not group together to stop the oligarchy, then you are responsible for their continued control. For example, if you think you can turn to Christian institutions for support, let us demonstrate to you that they are complicit with everything that is going on. In the 1960s, under Vatican II, the Catholic Church submitted to Islam. Before Vatican II, Catholics, were taught that Islam was darkness, and the dark is always associated with Satan. But after Vatican II, Catholics were taught that Muslims and Christians pray to the same God. By the 1990s, Pope John Paul II was kissing the Arabic Quran in front of sheikhs, Muslim bishops. The articles and photos about his actions are still to be found on the internet, even if the news media of the oligarchy don't want you to know about it. The Pope bowed to the Muslim holy book, the Quran, and he kissed it. Don't think that Pope is some uneducated idiot. John Paul II was a famous philosopher before he became a Pope. The highly educated staff in the Vatican have accumulated thousands of years of study of history, theology, Islam, Arabic, etc., etc. They know that the Leonine walls, which fully encircled the Vatican for the first time in history, were built to keep out jihadis in the 9th century. Every day, the oligarchy of the Vatican travels past walls built to keep out Islam, and then they go and lie to their herd that when the Quran says, kill the unbelievers, the Quran is a book of peace. It wasn't just the Pope in the 1960s, or the Pope in the 1990s, or in 2001, but in 2015, Pope Francis was also saying, the Quran is a book of peace. It's pretty sobering, because I actually said that no one deserves to die of a stroke, and I was basically saying, God rest Pope Francis. That's a bit of an eye-opener for me. Every day's a school day, as they say. Anyway, where was I? The Church of England is no better than the Catholic Church. Why didn't the thousands of theologians in the Catholic Church or the Church of England educate their herd by producing Muhammad's Quran and telling the public the truth? Because they are part of the oligarchy. Pope John Paul II, the Quran kisser, was turned into a saint. Literally. Point 12. Only farmed animals look for someone to herd them. Sovereign individuals take personal responsibility. It's your responsibility to teach those around you to stop being distracted by bread and circuses. The clock is ticking. Remember, It's 15 years since Tommy Robinson created the English Defence League, and in another 15 years, the indigenous people of Britain will be a minority in England, despised and discriminated against in their own land. Point 13. Consider the possibilities for concerted peaceful civil disobedience. For example, what's to stop someone from creating a group on, for example, Telegram Messenger and getting everyone they know to invite friends and family? Once there's 200,000 members, think of the powerful effects that group can have. Imagine bringing the economy to a stop every time the oligarchy need to be taught a lesson. Imagine 1 million people all phoning in sick to work every 10 days. Some phone in sick for 1 day, others for 3 days. Make the oligarchy prove that they don't care about the welfare. Make them change the law so that sick days require you to see a doctor. Such actions might inconvenience you, but massive people power in peaceful civil disobedience is the only way you're going to exert control on this fascist elite. I will discuss that point in a moment. 100 years ago, the working class got organised and had a general strike where multiple sections of society would be shut down simultaneously. It's time to return to this kind of action. You don't need trade unions to organise a general strike. Trade unions are mostly run by Trotskyists, and trade unions are some of the corporate bodies of the fascist state. You will almost never find a communist in Britain who is not an employee of the fascist state or a member of a trade union. But if you were to object to immigration, your trade union would get you sacked. Point 14. Look for other ways to become ungovernable. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. The fascist state relies on eliminating your leaders. Disperse, decentralize, organize, be imaginative. You have to destroy the oligarchy in order to get direct democracy. If the people do not abolish the oligarchy, then the oligarchy will continue subjugating and replacing the indigenous people. If many of the above suggested actions seem too inconvenient for you, then you have answered no to Enoch Powell's question. Do the British people wish to remain a nation? In the definition of democracy, quoted at the start of chapter 6, it is direct democracy which comes first, and representative democracy, indirect democracy, is an afterthought. Democracy is all about rule by the common people, not by some small group of privileged people. The oligarchy have for centuries kept the common people from understanding that representative democracy is just a means for the oligarchy to rule. As Orwell said about the repression and thought control in the totalitarian society of 1984, a society controlled by the wolves in sheep's clothing of Fabian socialism. If there is any hope, it lies with the common people. And that completes Tommy Robinson's manifesto. But before I go any further, I will say this as far as the civil disobedience thing is concerned, because I said I'd return to that point. So, in the book, they say 100 years ago, the working class got together and... Oh, wait, no, sorry, it was a bit further up. Such actions might inconvenience you, but mass power, peaceful civil disobedience is the only way you're going to exert control on this fascist elite. I disagree at this point. That's probably one of the few points I disagree with in the entirety of this book. Because the way I look at it is I think we have gone past the point of peaceful resolution, quite frankly. I think we're at a stage where civil war is imminent. There's even been, was his name David Betts or something? But there's one person who's actually come out and said this English civil war is going to be ethnic. There are people already claiming that when we go to this civil war, That it is effectively going to be Christians versus Muslims again. And that point that they made about the Vatican walls that were meant to keep out the Muslims in the 9th century, and the fact that the Pope is going out of his way to walk along that wall and say the Quran is a book of peace. Sobering, isn't it? I'll be clear, of course. I don't want a violent revolution. I don't want civil war. But as I've said many times in my main political videos, the cold, bitter truth is that civil war is coming, whether we want it or not. It is going to happen very soon. Very, very soon. Definitely within the next year at most. Because our oligarchy has effectively pushed us right to the edge of that cliff. And we have got one or two choices. We either fight back against the oligarchy, maybe even to some extent overthrow them, or we accept our replacement and we live up the rest of our lives on our knees. Because that's effectively what will happen. The barbarians from their third world shitholes, who are still coming over here, will destroy our cultures, destroy our societies. There'll be more Turkish barbers and fucking kebab shops than I can keep count of, littering down there, acting as a front for whatever they want to use their money towards, whether it's terrorism or whatever. And effectively, we will end up getting replaced. It's as simple as that. The oligarchy doesn't care about the indigenous people. It wants to replace us because we're all too inconvenient. Because if we were to find out the truth, we'd all be off our backsides, absolutely revolting. There would be riots up and down the country. Just like that. And they know that. Keir the traitor Starmer knows that. That's why they're doing everything they can to control us. That is why they're trying to distract us with the whole bread and circuses. Or in my case, chocolate and ice cream. Anyway, they're trying to make sure that we are distracted from the main issues that are going on in this country. Because if we ever found out, there would be hell to pay. Remember the point I made as well in the past. 1% control the world. 4% are global sellout puppets. 90% of the world are still fast asleep. 5% know and are trying to wake up the 90%. And the 4% are trying to stop the 5% from waking up the 90%. That's what it boils down to. We, the 5%, must continue waking up more and more people. Because the more people we have on our side, ready to take a stand against the oligarchy, the more likely they are to back down, surrender, or be overthrown. Let me be clear, as I said, I don't really want it to go down the violent path. I cannot stress that enough. But it may be inevitable at this point. But the more of us there are, the greater the chance we have of taking back this country from the fascistic oligarchy that currently rule over us, quite frankly. There were a few other things in here as well. So, there is one point I want to read out by the looks of it. So 11 and 16 I want to read out from these notes. So, from 11, from Vatican II, the Church regards with esteem also the Moslems. They adore the one God, living and subsisting in himself, merciful and all-powerful, the creator of heaven and earth, who has spoken to men. They take pains to submit wholeheartedly to even his inscrutable decrees, just as Abraham, with whom the faith of Islam takes pleasure in linking itself, submitted to God. Though they do not acknowledge Jesus as God, they revere him as a prophet. Since in the course of centuries, not a few quarrels and hostilities have arisen between Christians and Muslims, this sacred synod urges all to forget the past. successive popes, would go on to kiss the Quran to deceive their herd, that Islam was a religion of peace, even though the Vatican acknowledges that Islam rejects Christ as God. The Catholic Church makes its herd forget the past, declared on the relationship of the Church of non-Christian religions. Nostra Aetate, proclaimed by His Holiness Pope Paul VI, 28th of October, 1965. And the website is www.vatican.va/archive/hist_councils II_Vatican council/documents/VAT-2 -II underscore DECL underscore 1965 1028 underscore Nostra dash aetate underscore en.html. Yes, I know that's going to be a mouthful to listen to, I'm sorry, but I digress. Point 16 as well. Pope John Paul II sat with sheiks as they lied and said Islam is peace. Him sitting there in complicity in 2001 as they cited verse after verse of the Quran. Note that the lying sheiks didn't cite any of the verses commanding the followers of Muhammad to follow his example and kill the unbelievers. On the occasion of the visit of Pope John Paul II, Umayyad Mosque, 6th of May, 2001. I'm not going to read out the whole website there because that thing is way longer. This was May 2001, so just a few months before jihadis killed 3,000 people on the 9/11 bombings. That's the thing. I don't think people understand that we are being replaced, and they need to start realizing they're being replaced. Now, I'm going to show you this now. So, here we've got, I know it's going to be reversed, and it's going to be a bastard for me to show you this, but basically, those black boxes, I think, are supposed to represent the amount of non-white people, non-white British people here in Britain. Right now, 2001, 13%. 2011, 20%. 2021, 26%. Then the next one. By 2031, 40... That's 5 years, 6 years, by the way. 40% not white British. I wish I could get this to show a bit more clearly. 2041, 52% not white British. And then by 2051, yeah, I think you could all just about read the black boxes on this one. That's 80% not white British. That is based off of, in each and every case, a 100% increase. For 2021, it was an increase from 2001 and actual history. In 2031, it's a 100% increase based off of 2011 on a moderate projection. For 2041, it would be 2021, and then to 2051, it would be 2031. But all under 100% projection increases. Moderate projection. The bottom line is, there are a lot of scary truths in this manifesto book. And I would highly recommend people get this and read it and understand it. I also recommend people get a hold of Animal Farm and start reading that to their kids. I recommend you start reading it out in general, because we need to get the truth out there. The oligarchy is going to do everything in their power to try and control us. But we need to fight back and educate our people. Knowledge is power. And oligarchy are terrified of that power getting into the people's hands. They are scared of the British people realising that they are being controlled and manipulated by a bunch of fascists. And they know if the British people find out, there will be an uprising. Just like that. That's why they're trying to keep us under control. They're trying to hope for the best, that playing their bread and circuses will keep us distracted from the home truths. That it will stop us from realising what they're doing. Well, unfortunately for the government, the British people are waking up, and before long, they'll see the government for what they are.